Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment. As usual, this is my custom right here. I like to take this time to welcome our guests because I know they are coming with several things that I deem very expensive, priceless in my eyes. Time. The value of time has been misunderstood by many, and so many of us do not know how to utilize it, how to partner with it, how to become one with it so that it can guide us. And so it is so precious. And I want to thank Sophie for coming and spending some of that precious, precious stuff with us. The other is the journey. The journey housed who we were, made us who we are today as we stand with knowledge, wisdom, insights, and all of those things that people say that sages acquire through their journey. We want to thank Sophie for coming and sharing both of those precious stuff with us. Sophie, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I appreciate the opportunity.
I can't wait to get to you. Tell the folks, how do you serve? How do you serve others? What is your way by which you are exchanging with other human beings while we're here?
So currently, at this point in time in my life, I made a recent shift actually in the last 5 years, and so for me right now, I work with entrepreneurial business women specifically who are going through massive heartbreak. I would say I had 3+1 heartbreaks in the last 5 years. I went through a divorce after 18 years, which was a conscious decision on both of our parts. But just because you choose to leave a relationship doesn't mean there's not going to be a heartbreak. So there was massive heartbreak. And during that time, while I was going through the divorce before it was completed, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I personally think that the fear of the unknown is one of the hardest things for human beings to deal with. And I had the fear of the unknown of what it's like to leave a marriage I was in for 18 years. So conceptually, if you think about it, I got married in my early 20s and pretty much grew up as an adult, or those adult years, inside of a relationship. So I had no idea who I was outside of the role of a wife.
Yeah.
So the fear of leaving that was huge. The uncertainty, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of failing, the fear of embarrassment, the fear of what other people would think, the fear of could I do it alone, the fear of would I ever be loved again. I was a young woman. I was like 41, not that young, but young enough. And then couple that with being diagnosed with cancer. I mean, if you think about, from my perspective, human beings have two things on the food chain that are bigger, stronger, badder than we are. I would say that's disease and war. And I think that cancer is one of those diagnoses where it just instantly brings up your mortality.
Yeah.
So I went through those two heartbreaks. And then a third heartbreak I went through at the same time, which many people might not realize is a heartbreak, is my ex-husband and I had built a thriving business together. And I had a thriving coaching practice in the corporate world. And to leave both of those thriving businesses left a big void in my life. So those three things were heartbreaking for me. And then we had the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think the pandemic was a heartbreak for human beings worldwide. Now, here's how I was blessed through the process. I was blessed through the process because while I was going through cancer, I had repartnered. And one thing I really wanted to go for in life that I hadn't gone for was to be a mother.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to have the strength to refuse treatment. I refused treatment even though it was a contraindication to my doctor's recommendation, because getting pregnant was a concern for the cancer to reoccur. I refused treatment to get pregnant. And 8 months after my lumpectomy, we were blessed with a baby boy.
Congratulations.
So thank you. So he's going to be 3 in November. He's healthy, happy. And so having gone through all of that, I actually thought I wasn't going to go back to work. I thought I was going to retire. I was pretty burnt out when I had left my big corporate career. Dealing with those life challenges took some energy, to be honest with you. But then, my son turns 2 last year and he's in daycare, and I gave myself a few months of a break, and I was just like, I got this space. What am I going to do with this space? And I just thought to myself, if I'm going to go back and serve, it's not going to be in the corporate world to help another organization make some more dollars. and it's been a process for me to figure it out, to be very honest with you. And where I have landed is, I feel where I can make the biggest difference in a human being's life is to support a woman who, an entrepreneurial businesswoman, because I know that world and I can relate to her, who's gone through or going through massive heartbreak, and who's not quite figured out how to get her love life or that love relationship to match the way she wants it to be. There's lots of conditioning, as we've spoken about earlier, that's contributed to gender roles and the limitation of how women show up in relationship and how it's disempowered women. And I feel like I'm somebody who had to break through so many different societal norms and social conditioning and my own limiting beliefs and my own negative self-talk based on things that weren't even my own thoughts in order to go for the life that I really wanted. And so I am now in a place where I have chosen to support women through that, so that they can liberate themselves and go for not only the business that they want, because I feel like when you're thriving in your personal life, you're thriving in your business and vice versa. And I do believe heartbreak impacts business in so many different ways. But to support her in knowing that whatever trauma she experienced as a child or in her relationships, or that came through generationally, or whatever she's telling herself, whatever she's listening to, it may not be the truth for her, and to help her decondition so that she can step up and attract who it is that's a match for her based on her wants, her needs, her desires, her thoughts. And so that's where I'm at now in my life. That's who I'm choosing.
So, Sophie, that's a powerful picture that you painted of a warrior beyond imagination. And I am very excited to get to know this warrior that sits before me. One of our customs is to go back into where it all began. I tell people it began there. The first space by which we reside as humans when we enter into this place called planet Earth is the unit family. That family, sometimes I refer to it as the science lab, where we have these two people that, from their trauma and how they see the world based on their trauma, they are now going to deposit data into you and I, as we are collecting data from our quote unquote family, mom, dad, grandmom, brothers and sisters, and so forth. What was your family unit like while you resided there for that time?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my parents divorced when I was 2. My dad is French Canadian, and I actually don't know a whole lot about the background there. His family was farmers. He's one of 6. He was the youngest. Um, I mean, I'm just struggling because I'm trying to figure out how to articulate. The kids were like driving tractors at the age of 2.
Yeah.
That's about as much as I know from that side of the family. So it tells me that, they learned a lot of things very young, and were adulting very young. My mother, her background is Indigenous, and it's not too many generations ago that my grandparents went through the residential school situations. I don't know a whole lot about that part of my background. I know a little bit. I never really took the time to really learn. I was just more focused on surviving, to be very honest with you.
Yeah.
So my parents divorced when I was 2, and I lived with my mom. I have a younger brother. And it was challenging. She was a single mother. Unfortunately, she went through a traumatic accident when I was about 10 years old that left her, she was electrocuted, which left her unable to walk for several years. So that was like a whole situation for us. And then fast forwarding till I was about 16 years old, she married an abusive alcoholic, which had us be in and out of women's shelters. So just to give you like some incidences that I can remember, it was a pretty unstable household. Although, my mom was a strong leader and I always felt loved and cared for, there were just situations that happened that could really impact, that really did impact my sense of self,
Yeah.
my view of self, my sense and view of the world.
Yeah.
And I went through things that other people have gone through worse and other people have not. And
Yeah.
those were my things that I went through.
I think the reason why I like to begin the conversation there, because I know for me, I was formed at a pretty young age because of some trauma that I went through, and it that served me. I walked with that belief into my 20s and into my late 20s when I began to notice certain things and then as they began to surface, those I've told those folks before about me. I vividly remember walking down my campus, going this in college, and a memory of my childhood came rushing in. And I was in my 20s, as I said, I remember running to find a location by which I can uh, break down and cry because, as the culture teaches, men don't cry, especially in public. So I had to find a place by which I could break down as a human being from the deepest parts of me and um, were able to deal with some of the memories that were coming. So I know that's why I usually start there because we are formed, if you will. So here's this young girl. She has been through much trauma, watching mom and being brought into a situation with a gentleman that is traumatizing the family. You also move into facilities that I'm sure has many young folks that are traumatized as well. So you're surrounded by trauma as you are moving through your life and you are looking into your future and you remember, if you will, this young woman, maybe in her late teens, thinking about college or not. What was your uh, mindset, if you recollect, while you were there? What was your purpose of choosing college? Some people choose it to get the hell out and different things like that. What were you looking at, Sophie, when you were there as this young woman looking in to beginning her future?
I adopted the belief early on that knowledge is power and that education was the thing that was going to get me out of my childhood situation. I did not have wealthy parents. I didn't have family. I wasn't afforded some of the luxuries that other people were afforded. I realized it was up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I was going to change the trajectory of my life was to be highly educated and to be um, just to be educated. And that's really when I started to realize I was very good in sales because I had started in high school a sales job.
Yeah.
But when I was in university, I started to realize that I was good in sales because I knew how to ask questions to help people identify what it is they wanted. So I knew
Mm-hmm.
how to identify a need. I knew how to listen, and then I knew how to tell them what was the solution for what they wanted, presented in a way that and then I knew how to ask for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just knew how to ask, do you want it? Do you not want it?
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that was just like, hey, I did all this work. Like, do you want this? Like, I was excited for them, you know?
How to close the deal,
And
as they say.
yeah, it was like, close the deal, you know? I gained their commitment, you know? And you had to
Yeah.
gain their commitment. I mean, I was just natural at that. I mean,
Yeah.
I came from the mindset as like, I'm not going to do all this work for you and not find out whether or not you want it. Like, I was just like so excited. But yes, back to your question, my primary thought process as to why university for me
Where,
was
excuse me, Sophie, where did you pick that up? How old were you when you recognized that education is the way out? Because you are surrounded by trauma. You're just
yeah.
this young girl being moved back and forth, experiencing that. What caused you to realize education is it?
I don't know the answer to that, but what's coming up for me that I can share is when I was very young, I wanted to be a lawyer, a
Mm-hmm.
divorce lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, The reason I wanted to be a divorce lawyer, if I was being very honest with you, is my parents were divorced. My father was not in
Yeah.
the picture. I thought that I would find some sense of power there.
Yeah.
It wasn't coming from a healthy place. And then I had evolved into wanting to be a lawyer like Richard Gere in Pretty Woman.
Yeah.
Some sort of corporate lawyer taking
Yeah.
apart
Yeah.
businesses. Again, what I'm feeling right now in the conversation is I had a loss of power as a
Yeah.
child. And so I was looking for ways to reclaim power. And power for me back then is very different than power is for me now. And power
Yeah.
for me back then was more about like status, job, money, winning.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess if I'm making conclusions for myself, the only way for me to get that was to be educated.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to be smarter than everyone else to outperform them.
Yeah.
And that would be power for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would have been able to suck back the power that I felt I didn't have as a child. I don't think that way now, but I was being very honest with you. And I was addicted to power. And so
Yeah.
I was addicted to learning and performing. And that's why sales
Yeah.
was such a nice compliment, because the more I sold, like that close was like an addictive
Yeah.
hit. It's like an adrenaline,
Yeah.
and so it satisfied that sense of power for me,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because it's also what caused me to burn out and get very sick.
Well, yeah, it's always the reciprocal of it, because when we are not in our right place, I tell people you have to learn how to recognize when you're squatting until you get to where you need to be. If you recognize you're squatting, you're not going to burn yourself out. So, because space is temporary, and so because you're moving someplace else, and so you will learn how to manage. And I would educate my staff, and I would tell them, "Says, all you guys, you have to remember you're squatters. You got to educate yourself and always keep moving. Don't stay in one position too long." So here you are. You are addicted to the power. And we get addicted to so many things on this planet. There's hundreds of thousands, millions of things that you can get addicted to. But here you are, this young woman. You found a skill by which you see where you can get your high, your fix, if you will. And you're moving through life and you're obtaining your fix from one sale to the other. How did that power begin to mold your thought life?
Well, let me just take a minute to really feel into that. It's where I formed my validation.
Yeah.
I started to seek out validation outside of myself. I started to seek validation in the number of zeros that was on my paycheck.
Yeah.
Started to really reinforce my competitive nature. And I also could see at a fairly young age, several years into it, that it wasn't the most healthy place to be. It wasn't who I was as a human being.
Yeah.
I wasn't being collaborative. I was being competitive. And I started to realize that power was not that. I also realized I have a gift of articulation and communicating nuances and unpacking conversations in a way that helped other people see things for themselves and connect the dots in a way that they couldn't necessarily do it for themselves. And so I started to desire that type of connected relationship, because the power that I was seeking before with sales, there's not really a connection there.
Yeah.
I started to get feel the void of life, the lack of love, the lack of connection, the lack of emotional intimacy. I'm not even talking about a love relationship. I'm just talking about being with another human.
Yeah.
And that void really started to shape the direction that I was going into. But to bring it back to your question, that sense of power that I received from the hit of a sale was taking me into a direction that was isolated and lonely and competitive and power over and control, lots of control, not like over people, but just controlling my life, like controlling circumstance situations, which had me live from. Yeah, well, you're trying to control the conversation to have it go a particular way. There's no exploration in it, really. I mean, it's a narrow box. That's why I didn't want to go back to that.
Yeah, that's how the mind of a salesperson navigates is that
Hmm.
they have these boundaries, that they know what those boundaries are. Um, the people, that the person that is in front of them, don't know that they're being guided within
Yeah.
those boundaries. And so, yeah, I came out of there. So I'm familiar with,
Yeah. So you understand.
yeah, I've been there.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I've been there. I
But
remember.
there was no joy, no
No,
joy. Like there was no joy. The fulfillment is like temporary, and
yeah,
it's not thriving. I don't call that thriving. That's like surviving. You're only as good as your last deal. Like
that's
there's no
exactly what,
sustainability in that,
that's the mantra within the sales industry. You're only as good as your last deal.
which
And
is like such
yeah,
a so sad.
isn't it? And
Yeah.
but that is the the industry by which they're in. And I've seen a lot of good people um, lose their way in that field
Mhm.
because of the next hit, if you will. So here you are, you're
Mhm.
moving through your life, and you recognize that you have a deeper, even more satisfying quality, is to be able to recognize people need, and then you're able to guide them as to articulate what their need is and so forth. As you discovered that, how did you begin to move towards it? Because you still have to feed, pay your car note, take care of the bills and all those different things, but yet you're seeing this. How did it begin to guide you, Sophie? And where did you end up, if you will, as it moved you through?
So I started taking personal development courses, and I started learning more about myself. And then I started taking coaching courses to learn how
How
to
old were
coach more.
you?
So,
Pardon the interruption. How old were you at
yeah,
this time?
no, I started taking personal development at the age of 23. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like early on.
Okay.
And so how that looked is, so it was early in my sales career, and
Yeah.
how it looked was, is because I was naturally good at listening and asking questions. I was a naturally good coach. And then when I started taking more leadership courses, personal development courses, um, and coaching courses, I took the learning and put it inside of, um, I stopped being a salesperson, and I started training salespeople, and I started training sales leaders. So I
Mm-hmm.
started training salespeople how to be stronger salespeople,
Yeah.
because I naturally knew how to do it. And then I knew how to coach, started to learn how to coach them,
Yeah.
and started learning how to lead them. And then I started training the leaders and how to be more coach like in their approach, so that
Mm-hmm.
they could open up their sales people and make a contribution and a difference, rather than just telling them what to do, because it doesn't develop a human.
Yeah.
And so I married it like that. That's how I married it. And that's how I started getting the opportunity. I traveled across North America working with Fortune 500 companies, training the sales leaders and the sales team. So I kept it within the realm of sales, because that was my expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because I kind of knew I would do well, it was like safe. It
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
safe bet for me. But I did evolve myself to be somebody who started to develop people's leadership and their own personal capacity within inside of that context.
Yeah. Here you are, a
So that's
young
how it
woman,
took.
though. You're gathering data concerning personal development, and those things always, those principles, when you begin to dig into them and study them, will begin to shift you. Um,
Mm.
and, some of it is noticeable and some of it is not. It'll manifest a few years down the road, but you're shifting. And
Yes.
as it begins to shift you and you're moving through your training, the trainers, if you will, and so forth, with all of that information, Sophie, when the training and all the people are gone and you're in your house, you're laying down, you're in your car on your way back from all the running around, what were you thinking, and what were you thinking about? What was your thought pattern? What was happening to Sophie?
Well, it was so fulfilling for me to support a human being to break through some form of limiting belief or limitation,
Yeah,
and to be able to do that became the new
drug.
Yeah, I didn't really want to say that. Yes, that's exactly that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, call me out. That's where the hit came,
Yeah.
and so it was still, unfortunately, as I'm looking back, looking outside of myself for some form of fulfillment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not like I could just not work and be so completely fulfilled. I found my fulfillment in supporting somebody else's growth.
Yeah.
I mean, I was doing my own growth, but yeah. And so, um, yeah, it became the new drug in a different way.
Yeah.
More of the same, a different color, kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that, and it's natural. It's a natural thing that the human being is moving from one to another. Even when one becomes awake in the sense where you're moving from one space to another. We are not designed to be complacent. Complacency is the enemy of personal development, as perfection also is an enemy of personal development. And so, because many people are afraid to start because they're not perfect. So I don't know how
Yeah, they
that
don't want
is,
to fail.
but yeah, that's the way that they were programmed. So, but we do move from one um, energy level to another, and it becomes something that we are addicted to. I'm addicted to my meditation. It's one of my favorite drugs to take in my life. I'm addicted to uh, excellent conversations like these. These are the things that now I am addicted to versus all of the other things. And so here's this young woman now moving. She recognizes stuff. She's leading the leaders and she is moving. Within this space, I'm sure you are dealing with your marriage. You're married at this time, around that time, and you're in this relationship and learning about you and recognizing things in your quiet moments, because it is there that we begin to listen to oneself because we get so busy hiding in our work. So when you weren't hiding, Sophie, what was going on?
That's a great question. No one really ever asks me that. And it's sad for me that no one really ever asks me that. It makes me feel like people don't really care. I guess that's sort of the stuff that was going on. I was like
Yeah,
lonely and isolated and disconnected. Um, I was a great performer
yeah, we're all
in
great
all
actors.
areas.
Yeah,
Yeah, like I was great in the arena of being in a corporate boardroom, and I was great in the arena of like satisfying the role, I guess, of what the wife role was for me at the time.
yeah,
And like, what did Sophie really want? She
yeah,
didn't. She didn't know.
yeah,
Um, I was really lonely. That's what was going on. I was just really lonely and really isolated and not feeling connected to the way I would have liked to have been connected. I mean, it's one thing to walk into a boardroom for 4 days and be connected with those people on a level that most people don't get to connect with, but then you walk out.
yeah,
And I yearned for more long-term relationships in that regard, and that was one of the things that career did not provide for me. And it's one of the reasons I'm not doing it that way again.
yeah.
I like deep, intimate relationships with fewer rather than short transactional relationships with a lot.
Yeah, yeah.
And so my heart was empty and broken a lot. I felt heartbroken a lot.
The marriage, tell people, marriage can be one of the loneliest places to be in when one is there with the wrong person. It is one of the darkest time. The amount of years that you're there, and you have glimpses of laughter and joy and stuff like that. And but within that space, there is much pain and darkness there, and I've been there, and so I've been through um, that while I was growing within the corporate world and the disconnect that takes place when one is in your acting role in the office and then when you come home and you're exhausted from the acting, but yet you have to continue to play with different characters and different outcomes. But that is the way it is when you are with the wrong person. You are there now, you're recognizing some stuff as you're moving through. And you said on the onset that it was a mutual decision. Once you recognize that, wait a minute, maybe both of us are dying here, it's best that we move forward. Because I know we're heading into this place, your last several years that you mentioned earlier. So as you began to make that decision because you know you have to do this in order to live. Mine was, and I've told my testimony before, Sophie, I was driving in a car coming back from the corporate deal thing. And I'm in the car thinking and contemplating and meditating on my life. And I realized the answer for my successful marriage would be for me to die. And I remember driving in the car and recognizing that I could make it work, yeah, that I would have to kill Ken. And I asked myself this question: what would you be? Would you recognize you? And I couldn't put it together. And so I remember I pulled off on the side of the street and started yelling, I am not going to die. On the highway, people flying by and seeing this crazy guy in his suit yelling, I'm not going to die. But that's what I had to do because I recognized I would have to, uh, Ken, and I didn't know who I would have become in order to be in a place that I was I was not happy. So as you recognize, Sophie, as you're moving through, you recognize there must be a change. Um, how did it come about, and what did it begin to do to you?
When I recognized there was a change, how did it come about? Well, I had known for a long time that there needed to be change,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I think that there's other women who make it the same as men too. I'm just going to speak from a female perspective, that there's like three very big common themes that we do that we sell out on ourselves, how we sell out on ourselves in the relationship. And it's one, it's like I had boundaries and I wobbled every time.
Yeah.
Out of fear of the abandonment that I would experience, the trigger of being rejected or abandoned, out of fear of being alone. I had non-negotiables that I never upheld. I made excuses and justified behavior so that I wouldn't have to uphold my non-negotiables because I was scared of the process of what it would be to get out.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that process was not going to be easy. I just knew that. I hoped for change for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then
We all do.
I got into my 40s and I was like, I am not getting any younger. like I am just honestly not getting any younger. Like when am I going to stand strong for myself? Like when am I going to choose myself and not the relationship? And when am I going to hold up my boundaries? And when am I going to stop living a lie, telling other people in their businesses that they need to communicate directly and have boundaries and all these things? And then in my home life, it fell apart. And I think that's one of the reasons I really want to support women who have business and then heartbreak, is because like, how do we women show up so strong and then we just fall apart in these relationships? And it's like, I had to break through the conditioning, which we were talking about earlier, of what it meant to be a woman, to walk away from a marriage. Like, is that really failure? Like, am I really supposed to prioritize my own needs in the sake of the relationship? Like, am I really supposed to be this unhappy to be a wife? Like, is that the way life is supposed to be for me? I mean, I had to really start to get very honest. And then I was like, after all the self-development I had done, this is like 20 years in, it's like, okay, Sophie, like, you can't live it only in certain areas of your life. That's not congruency. Yeah. That's actually out of integrity. You're out of integrity with yourself and standing in front of a boardroom. Like, it just doesn't match anymore. And I was just very sick all the time. My stomach was just so sick all the time. I mean, I don't have those stomach issues anymore. And I really believe the body communicates, and I suppressed it for a long time. And so you asked me, like, what started to happen? It's like, I just started to question if that's how life is going to be for me. I'm going to be that unhappy for the sake of whatever society has told me I'm supposed to be for so long. And I would have rather died than do it any longer. And I got a glimpse of what was possible, and I went for it.
You're talking about the programming. That's what keeps us there. Culture.
That's what keeps us stuck.
Religion, surrounding marriage, family, the stuff about family and what is being teach and preached in our family as far as marriage and relationship. All of those things are the cords that are used to bind us and keep us there. And so as we began to ask those questions, and I think, as I mentioned to you, one of the most powerful gift that one can give ourselves is to begin to become that perpetual investigator of the self. Why am I here? Why do I need this? All of these things, as one begins to investigate and begin to question your motives, if you will. And as you begin to do that, you recognize, wait a minute, I'm a little more valuable than this. And so you take that step. And I tell people, Sophie, I call it a statement of faith in the sense that I believe this thing more than anyone else, and I don't care about whatever. And because I made a statement to me, we are designed to, once you mean it, you will take the corresponding steps to make it a reality. As you decided that, okay, enough is enough. And I tell people, when you get there, until you get there, your life is circular. You'll meet your shadow there again because you haven't moved, because you haven't decided yet. When we decide, you would be amazed at the progression of the self as we begin to move forward. Once you decided, so, and you moved from where you're at, you began to take the step, because you're this young woman, you're in your 40s, you're full of fear, you're fearful of everything. I'm not sure, this is the marriage I've been in. I'm fearful of failure with my business. I'm fearful because your business is a relationship. Yes. You and your husband had your marriage, your relationship, but there's another relationship within, and it's a business that is a relationship. Yes. So you're losing all of your relationships. Yes. And you are in the darkest, they call it the dark places, and here you are. There's no one there but you. You're in the dark spiral, as they say. What did you begin to say to Sophie as the darkness is closing in on her to get her to take that first step?
It's a good question. I got a glimmer of some joy in my life. And I just thought, if that's possible for me, then I want to try to get more of that. Yeah. I started to learn how to fulfill my own needs. And I thought, if I can feel this happy, then I deserve to have more of that. And I started to be very honest with myself. I mean, I think here's the other thing that we do when we're in that kind of a long-term relationship, or when any relationship really doesn't have to be long-term, is we set our boundaries or our non-negotiables, or we communicate what our needs are, and then our partner tells us very point blank that they're not going to get met in some way. Yeah. And yet we stay. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, that was on me. Yeah. You know, as much as I want to blame the other individual, those are my actions, those were my choices, those were my reasons for staying. I had the power all along. Yes. And when I started to realize that I was not getting any younger. And I actually started to think, like, if I'm going to go find another, like love, I mean, these are my best years are just like wasted. I mean,
I gotta get out.
I mean, I still want to look good when I'm like, that's just how I was starting to think. It's like my best years are starting to slip away.
Yeah.
And if I don't take some time to process myself out of this relationship and heal, it may never happen for me.
Yeah.
And I just was not okay with that thought. And I started to really believe I deserved more. And it was the moment I believed I deserved more was the moment everything changed.
Yeah.
And until, like you said, you make that decision, until a human being, in my opinion, decides they deserve more, they put up with and conform to all the things that keep them stuck. And I started to, it's like I was in the eye of the storm of a tornado.
Mm-hmm.
And I very calmly stood there and let the debris, and I chose what I wanted to stay, and I let the rest fall. And it's like that. And you have to be willing to let the rest fall.
Yeah, I agree. It's where we become the designer of our life. It is right there in that dark space. And I tell people that the darkness comes because someone inside of you needs to wake up. Because that the creator in you, it's time for them to arise. Until then, you're just on the program. But when you decide that I want to create something else, you saw that joy and you go, wait a minute, I want to create something else. And when that becomes real, you begin to step into your power. But it's like anything. I tell people when a plane takes off, they go to one direction, they run into these wonderful things called turbulence. And the beautiful thing about turbulence is that there's so many different kinds of turbulence.
Yeah, for me it was cancer, like that.
Yes. And so these turbulence come, but we have to have a few things in place. One must begin to take ownership. I am the captain. I will learn to navigate within all of these turbulence. And so we then began to bring in tools to get us skillful enough to begin to navigate. So here you are. You've walked away, you began to make your step. And then this beautiful evil thing says, I want to push you a little more.
Well, just a little.
And so you went to your physician, something is going on. And you went and they said, Sophie, you have this cancer. Now, Sophie, I want you to talk to me about this because you mentioned something in the beginning that I thought was very powerful, where you made a decision against your physician. And you told us why. So here's this young woman, life spinning out. You've got some taste of personal development. You started it in your young years. What were some of those tools first before we go into that? What were some of those tools that you had in your quiver that you did not use that you began to pull out and start bringing into your forefront to start helping you to navigate through all of this thing that was going on in your life?
Yeah, the number one thing that I did is I had unwavering faith in my partnership with the universe.
Yeah.
I knew that I was not the only one who had a say.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get emotional now because it's not something I've talked about, so I appreciate the opportunity. So I was not going to do chemotherapy.
Yeah.
I would have rather swallow a bottle of pills, to be very honest with you. It was just not the way that I wanted to go. I happened to not be a and I had 3 months before they could tell me what my treatment protocol was.
Mm-hmm.
3 months is a long time to not know what type of treatment you're going to need, what type of cancer you have, like what the prognosis, like all of that jazz. And so I thought to myself, okay, universe, we have I didn't know at the time it was going to be 3 months. I just knew it day by day. And I was like, okay, universe, what do I have to learn to turn this around?
Yeah.
I'm not going to give you my breast. You don't get my breast. And I'm not going to do cancer or chemotherapy. So what do I have to learn? Give it to me. And every day I had to learn things. I was learning things like people please. I had to cut that shit out.
Mhm.
There's no more people pleasing.
Yeah.
And I had to have serious conversations with people about how I behaved in the past and how I was going to start to show up now,
Yeah.
and how disruptive that could be to the relationship. And I had to renegotiate all my major relationships, specifically with my mom and my brother. I was somebody who operated out of guilt.
Mhm.
I would do things out of guilt. That had to go. That just had to go. I was somebody who lived in shame cycles.
Yeah.
I would act out because I would people please for so long, and then my inner child would get upset, and then I would act out in ways, and then I would live in shame. That had to go. I was not communicating exactly what my needs were, how I wanted it, and what the consequences were going to be if I was in a relationship with anybody that wasn't getting met. That had to go. So every day I had to communicate. I was communicating with the universe. What do I need to learn? What do I need to learn? What do I need to learn? And it was to the point where my results were supposed to be in. And I went to the doctor and he's like, I'm sorry, but we had a backlog and we didn't get to them. I'm like, okay, so the universe wants me to learn more.
Yeah.
Okay, universe, what else do I have to learn? Like, what is it and that was my approach. I remember I could tell you a story. I was going for a walk because it was the thing that distracted me the most. I was walking like 10K or more a day. And I remember being on a bridge, and I remember it was my right breast. I had a lumpectomy. The biopsy came back inconclusive, so they had to go in for a lumpectomy. Came back as stage 1 breast cancer. It was not in my lymph node. And I just remember, like I remember my breast, like it was communicating to me. As this may sound for some people, this was the way it was, and it was like, Sophie, if you keep giving everything away, I will take you down.
Yeah.
This is a warning. This is just a warning for you. You need to stop giving and start protecting yourself and start receiving. Otherwise, this is going to just get worse for you.
Yeah.
And I like, it was just like, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was just like, I have to reevaluate how I can't be a performer anymore for everyone else and make life happy for them. I got to make life happy for me and be willing to stand in the fire of disappointing people.
Yeah.
Because we are all adults and we can be disappointed, and it's not my job to take care of everyone else's feelings. It's actually my job to communicate my truth in an eloquent and graceful way. I don't have to be rude about it, but I do need to be able to communicate my truth, and I need to be confident and comfortable and strong enough for the other person to not be okay with that without conceding to them.
Yeah.
And those were some major behavioral changes that I had to undergo and learn. And I was blessed it was only 3 months, and it was 3 months. And when it came time to get my my treatment protocol, they wanted me to do 25 radiation treatments and do tamoxifen for 2 years. And at the point in time, I was 42. And I said, I want to try for a baby. And they said, if you try for a baby, Sophie, that's a risk for the cancer to come back. And that we need to have some serious conversations of what it's like to be a pregnant woman who has cancer.
Yeah.
So like, that was not easy.
Yeah.
And I said, I would rather try for this one thing that I haven't been able to experience in life than go on another trip, be on another beach, wear another pair of expensive shoes, eat another fancy restaurant, drive in another fancy car. I want to know I want to know myself as a mother, because it was the one thing I ran away from. And I will take that risk. And I said to the doctor, I said, what are the chances that the cancer comes back if I do nothing? And, here's what's just so sad about the medical system. He's like, oh, that's a completely different spreadsheet, Sophie. I said, well, do you think that we could look at that spreadsheet? And I'm so sad for people whose English or ability to ask questions wasn't as in tune as mine was. And he said, well, you're a young woman. The chances of breast cancer coming back are fairly strong. We want you to do the radiation treatment for a 15% benefit. It doesn't come back. So I'm like, you want me to do this for for a chance that it doesn't come, like it reduces my chances of it coming back by 15%.
Yeah.
Like, what if I change my lifestyle? He's like, they don't take that into consideration. So anyways, they look at this spreadsheet and he's like, well, you have an 89% chance it does not come back systemically. And in 5 years, it'll be 82% chance it doesn't come back systemically. And then every 5 years, it goes down like that. And I was like, you're telling me if I do nothing, there's an 89% chance it doesn't come back systemically, but you want me to do this treatment that's going to damage my body for a 15% chance that it doesn't come. This doesn't make sense. I said, oh, excuse me, doctor, am I crazy to think that I'm okay not to do treatment? He goes, well, it's not what I would recommend because we want to keep you safe, but the odds look good.
Well, we're a legalistic society, Sophie, and so he has to say that.
I get it. That's what makes me so sad. And I'm so proud of myself for looking fear in the eye and being able to have the cognitive ability and the questioning skills to ask those questions. But how many people just are living in the fear of it takes over?
Not many, Sophie, not many.
It's sad for me.
It's not many, and that's why you went through what you went through, because there was a need that was seen ahead, and we're like, oh, we need someone to address those things because we see that there's a lot of women going through and they have this need. Let's pick Sophie. And let's take her out and drop her in so that she can experience this, so that when Sophie comes out and you now speak to someone, a woman that has a situation, a divorce, loss of business, loss of relationship, loss of this, all of that. When you open your mouth, Sophie, the power that your words would be released from, because where it's coming from, it's from a place where you have been and you're familiar with, and you know exactly where they're at. You know the question to ask them to bring out the results, because they are in a state of fear and they're not even awake to understand what question to ask. And so that's why you went through what you did. So here you are. You've been through this thing, and Sophie, 3 months, that's a fast growth, if you will.
Yeah, thank you. It is fast.
To go in and excavate all of those things that you had there and you recognize, and now you're beginning to establish or reestablish your boundaries. As you began to look at yourself and you saw you, and you saw the boundaries up again, you were looking at this woman. She has learned to love herself, to accept herself. What was that like?
Well, it's like rolling around in a cloud.
Yeah.
It's a soft place to live.
Yeah.
It's a peaceful place to live. My central nervous system settled. The frenetic energy in my body, which I used to think was energy and ambition, dissipated. My capacity to feel joy and love expanded. My abilities to take a huge risk to have a child and follow a desire was rewarded. What's it like to live there? It's peaceful, and I think what happens, and I just want to say this, is that peacefulness can be misinterpreted as boredom.
Yeah.
Because when you're somebody like myself who was so addicted, I'm going to use that word because it's almost like what it was, to the chaos of life, because I learned that as a young age in the trauma that I experienced, peace looks like boredom.
Yeah.
And it's just not. And I hope that more people can understand that peace is not boredom. It's a place to appreciate a soft landing and a place where you actually can open your heart in peace. It's hard to open your heart in chaos.
Yeah.
And the amount of love and joy I have in my new relationship and with my baby, like just my baby, is something I haven't experienced before. The safety of that my relationship and bond with my child is one of my favorite relationships and one of my most safest relationships because of the peace that's in that relationship.
Yeah. I tell people,
Yeah.
Sophie, that there's a difference between living and life. It's two different
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
most people are living, they're in a program and they are comfortable doing what's necessary. The 9 to 5, getting up, having the coffee in the car, listening to music, drinking, a couple of beers on the weekend, getting drunk, showing up
Yeah.
on uh, running into church maybe or something like that, seeing some family, getting high, and then starting all over again. And next thing you know, you're 60, 70 years down, and they've been living, but they've never
And
had life.
disassociating.
Yeah, they've never had
Yeah.
life. And so here you are in your space right now. Life. Your relationships are so alive and bright versus where it was before. Your focus, you have few relationship or intense relationship. You have regenerated your, because when you first came in, you told us what you are doing right now.
Mm.
As you are here in present today, and you're looking at yourself and you realizing the gift that is you and your desire to begin to serve others that are in the space of where you came from. Talk to one of them that talk to you, Sophie, not one of them. Talk to you when you look back and you saw yourself 5 years ago when you were looking at the onset of the beginning of your darkness. What would you say to her as you are now here?
Like once I started to make the transition, you mean?
Yeah, when you're here today, you're looking at yourself. Talk to Sophie when Sophie was 5 years out, when all hell was about to,
Yeah, just
um,
starting.
yeah, all hell was about to take place in our life. And this is, you're talking to one of your clients, if you will, but it's you. You're you're having that
Yeah.
conversation.
So before I left my divorce, before I left my marriage and started to embark on the divorce, I would say to myself, don't wait for a major life transition, like for me was divorce or a health issue, to get what you want out of life. Just don't make that be the reason that you're waking up.
Yeah,
You have the power now. You know deep down inside if you're happy or not and what you want. And you can actually have that if you just have the courage. And you don't have to do it alone. You don't. There are people like me and like you who want to support people through this process because we've gone through it and we know the challenge of it. But on the other side, you get to meet yourself for who you came here to be. And for me, it would be so sad if I never got to meet that version of myself. And for anyone who's listening, you know there's a version inside of you that's, I was going to say, waiting to be birthed. And only you can birth her or him. Only
yeah,
you have that. And it's in your power. You get to say yes or no. You get to make the choices to stay or go. You get to take the actions. It's all up to you. And as much as you may feel trapped, you're not. And it's about being brave and having the courage and listening to your intuition and speaking your truth. And if it's because you're afraid of disappointing your parents, which I hear so much, I honestly believe your parents will be so happy to see the person you've grown into, because for me, parenthood is about watching your child blossom and become the person they're meant to be. And I really do believe your parents will come around. And if it's because you're afraid to be a societal outcast, you're in the wrong arena already. Get yourself into the right arena, because there's other arenas out there that will support what you want.
yeah,
There's your tribe. You're in the wrong. I was in the wrong arena
yeah,
for 40 years.
yeah.
And I'm just learning what my new arena is. And to play in the arena that's the one that's made for you, it feels like you're rolling around in a cloud. It's just so peaceful and happy and joyful. And it's just, there's no edges really, you know? And so I would encourage you to speak your truth and to find the support and to go for it, because the joy and the connection and the love and the intimacy that you're looking for with a love mate or just with people in general is available. Those people do exist. And don't tell yourself they don't, because that's just a lie we tell ourselves that keeps us stuck.
And all you guys listening, especially the ladies, I have someone that has gone through some hard times. And because she has gone through some hard times, she knows the terrain of divorce. That's pretty dangerous terrain. She knows the terrain of losing a business. That's powerful terrain. That business was a partner with her husband. That is some powerful stuff right there. And then you have cancer on top of that. The fact that going against I guess the pharmaceutical or the medical society, I got someone for you, someone who was determined to have a child when the odds that they were telling her was not in her favor. I've got someone for you guys. And I am going to provide all the links for you to get access to her. You need to get in her space. She can walk with you, she can empathize with you. Um, those words that she will speak to you, it's that hug that you need, that, uh, um, you know, cloud that you didn't know existed. She can guide you how to get there, because it is a reality. You see the smile on her face when she talks about it, that there is no edges. And when there is no edges, that's all safety. And she'll be able to guide you to safety. And I want you guys to hunt her down. You've got to get your freedom. She can guide you to your tribe. Find your tribe. It is time not to listen to mom and dad. What about you? You have been living on this planet for a long time in pain. What about you? Ask yourself
Yeah.
that question. What about? And um, begin to love yourself. There is no one that will love you like you. Begin to be honorable to you. Those are, so Sophie talked about those boundaries that you are allowing your partner to overrun because you are giving them permission to do it. Pick those things back up. Change your life. I have a woman that is able to help you. Sophie, I want to thank you so much coming to Threads of Enlightenment and engaging with your beautiful journey and your precious time with us here at Threads of Enlightenment. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I had a really fulfilling conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.